The conversation I overheard through their kitchen window lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. My daughter-in-law thought she was whispering, but her words were loud enough to shatter 30 years of trust. What she didn't know was that the old man she wanted gone had just acquired enough power to make her worst nightmares come true. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Richard Sterling, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal life could offer. I was wrong. It was a crisp October morning when I decided to surprise my son David with his favorite homemade apple pie. I'd helped them with their house down payment, $180,000 from my retirement savings, and seeing David's happiness had made every penny worth it. I parked outside their beautiful colonial in Westbrook Heights, noting Sarah's BMW was there. Strange, since she usually worked late. The house seemed quiet as I approached with the still warm pie. That's when I heard Sarah's voice through the cracked kitchen window. "David, we need to talk about your father." I froze, suddenly feeling like an eavesdropper in my own son's life. "What about Dad?" David's voice carried that cautious tone I remembered from his teenage years. "He's becoming a problem. For us, for our future." My chest tightened. Problem? I'd been nothing but supportive since their wedding. "Sarah, that's my father you're talking about." "Exactly, and that's the issue. Think about it, David. We're trying to build something here. Your father represents the old version of you. The old version of me? The version that settles for ordinary. Your father is sweet, but he's from a different generation. His values are holding you back from your real potential." The pie trembled in my hands. "Dad's been incredibly generous to us, Sarah. The down payment alone was his choice. And honestly, it created an obligation we didn't ask for. Every decision we make, we have to consider how Richard will react. It's exhausting." I felt punched in the stomach. My gift of love had become a chain around their necks. "I don't think Dad sees it that way." "Of course he doesn't. He doesn't understand boundaries. Last week he showed up with groceries. The week before, light bulbs. He treats our home like his second house. Because he loves us." "David, loyalty and enabling are two different things. Your father doesn't belong in our new life. We need clear boundaries. Maybe he visits twice a month, with advance notice." "Sarah, I can't just push my father away. I'm asking you to choose growth over comfort. Our marriage, our future, or the same old dynamic that keeps you tethered to who you used to be." The silence stretched between them. When was the last time we made a decision without considering how Richard would react? Your father's presence isn't just physical. It's psychological. He represents safety, but those things are the enemy of ambition. So what do you want me to do? Tell him our relationship is evolving, that we need space to grow as a couple, that his constant involvement isn't healthy. And if he doesn't understand? Sarah's laugh was cold. "Then you'll know where his priorities really lie." I'd heard enough. I backed away from the window, my legs unsteady. The apple pie felt impossibly heavy, a symbol of everything I'd apparently been doing wrong. I made it to my car and drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with Sarah's words, "Your father doesn't belong in our new life." That evening I sat in my study with whiskey and a legal pad, processing what I'd learned. Sarah's words echoed, "Your father doesn't belong in our new life." The pain was sharp, but underneath it something colder was growing. I'd built Sterling Construction from nothing over 4 decades. If Sarah wanted to treat this like a business decision, I could play that game. I opened my laptop and began researching. David worked at Morrison Development. Steady income, but nothing spectacular. Sarah's startup, TechFlow Solutions, had received $2.3 million in funding from Pinnacle Capital Group. The house was worth approximately $840,000. They'd put down $180,000, my money, and financed $660,000 through Morrison Savings and Loan. Morrison Savings and Loan. I knew that name. I walked to my filing cabinet and found documents from the Morrison building renovation I'd completed earlier that year. During that project, I'd gotten to know Tom Morrison, the bank president. I remembered our lunch conversation in July. Tom had mentioned the bank was struggling with mortgage portfolios due to rising rates and a softening market. "Sometimes I wonder if we'd be better off selling these portfolios to a private investor," Tom had said, "someone who understands the local market. At the time, I just nodded politely. Tonight, his words took on new significance. I picked up my phone and called Tom. It was past 9, but Tom was a night owl. "Richard, good to hear from you. How's retirement?" "Can't complain, Tom. Listen, that conversation we had about mortgage portfolios, is that still something you're considering?" "Potentially, yes. Are you thinking of diversifying your investments?" "I might be. Could we meet tomorrow to discuss the process?" "Of course. How about 10 o'clock at my office?" "Perfect. And Tom, this stays between us for now." "Absolutely." I hung up and returned to my legal pad, outlining what I knew. By midnight, I had a plan forming. If Sarah wanted to play hardball, I was prepared to show her what 40 years in business had taught me about leverage. Tom Morrison's office overlooked downtown from the 15th floor, the same building I'd renovated. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Richard, you mentioned an interest in mortgage portfolios," Tom said, pouring coffee. "I'm looking to diversify. You mentioned challenges with your current portfolio." Tom nodded. "We've got about $47 million in residential mortgages we're considering moving. All prime borrowers, good neighborhoods. For the right investor, we'd sell at 92 cents on the dollar, guaranteed 6.8% annual return." I did quick math. $47 million at 92 cents would cost about $43 million, well within my capability. How many mortgages? 237 individual loans ranging from $180,000 to $1.2 million. Would I be able to review the specific properties and borrowers? Absolutely. Complete documentation on every loan. I leaned forward. "Tom, would there be any conflicts if someone I knew had a mortgage in that portfolio?" His eyebrows rose. "As long as all legal requirements are met, personal relationships shouldn't be an issue." "I'd like to see that portfolio list. When could we arrange that?" "I can have a summary ready by Friday." "I'll come in. And Tom, keep this confidential until I've reviewed everything." "Of course." We shook hands, and I left with my mind racing. By Friday, I'd know if David and Sarah's mortgage was part of that portfolio. Friday morning, I sat in Morrison's conference room with a thick binder. Tom had provided complete documentation, property addresses, loan amounts, payment histories. I scanned the alphabetical list. Adams, Bradley, Cooper, Davidson, and there it was. Residential mortgage number 47,291. Borrowers, David R. Sterling and Sarah M. Sterling. Property, 847 Maple Street, Westbrook Heights. Original loan, $660,000. Current balance, $643, $700. My son's mortgage. Right there in black and white. "Find anything interesting?" Tom asked. "Just getting oriented. This is comprehensive." "The servicing transfer, how quickly can that be completed?" "Usually 30 to 45 days. The new owner has full discretion over payment terms within federal regulations." I closed the binder. "I want to make an offer." "For the entire portfolio?" "Yes. $43.2 million. Cash, 30-day closing." Tom's eyes widened. "That's above our target price, Richard." "I believe in paying fairly for quality assets." "I'll present this to our board, but I can't imagine any objections. When could you provide proof of funds?" "By Monday." "Excellent. Assuming board approval, I think we have a deal." As we shook hands, I felt satisfaction and dread. In 30 days, I would own my son's mortgage. What I did with that power would depend on what David and Sarah chose to do next. The next 3 weeks passed strangely. David called twice, both times with awkward distance confirming my fears about Sarah's influence. "How are you doing, Dad?" he'd ask, but there was no real warmth. "Fine, son. How's work?" "Can't complain. Listen, Sarah and I think it might be good if we spaced out our visits more. Gave each other room to breathe." There it was. Sarah's ultimatum, delivered in David's voice. "Whatever you think is best," I said neutrally. "We're trying to establish new routines as a couple." "I understand." But I didn't understand how we'd gotten to this point. The mortgage purchase closed on a Tuesday. Tom called personally to confirm. "Congratulations, Richard. You now own 237 residential mortgages. Borrowers receive notification letters tomorrow." "Excellent." "And the servicing transfers?" "Complete by next Friday. Your attorney has all documentation." I hung up and walked to my home office. where I'd prepared a special folder for mortgage number 47,291. For over 2 years, they'd made payments on time. $3,247 monthly. A substantial sum, but manageable. What they didn't know was that their mortgage had been transferred to Sterling Financial Holdings, the company I'd established for this purchase. What they really didn't know was that Sterling Financial Holdings was wholly owned by their irrelevant father-in-law. At the time, I just nodded politely. Tonight, his words took on new significance. I picked up my phone and called Tom. It was past 9, but Tom was a night owl. "Richard, good to hear from you. How's retirement?" "Can't complain, Tom. Listen, that conversation we had about mortgage portfolios, is that still something you're considering?" "Potentially, yes. Are you thinking of diversifying your investments?" "I might be. Could we meet tomorrow to discuss the process?" "Of course. How about 10 o'clock at my office?" "Perfect. And Tom, this stays between us for now." "Absolutely." I hung up and returned to my legal pad, outlining what I knew. By midnight, I had a plan forming. If Sarah wanted to play hardball, I was prepared to show her what 40 years in business had taught me about leverage. Tom Morrison's office overlooked downtown from the 15th floor, the same building I'd renovated. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Richard, you mentioned an interest in mortgage portfolios," Tom said, pouring coffee. "I'm looking to diversify. You mentioned challenges with your current portfolio." Tom nodded. "We've got about $47 million in residential mortgages we're considering moving. All prime borrowers, good neighborhoods. For the right investor, we'd sell at 92 cents on the dollar, guaranteed 6.8% annual return." I did quick math. $47 million at 92 cents would cost about $43 million, well within my capability. How many mortgages? 237 individual loans ranging from $180,000 to $1.2 million. Would I be able to review the specific properties and borrowers? Absolutely. Complete documentation on every loan. I leaned forward. "Tom, would there be any conflicts if someone I knew had a mortgage in that portfolio?" His eyebrows rose. "As long as all legal requirements are met, personal relationships shouldn't be an issue." "I'd like to see that portfolio list. When could we arrange that?" "I can have a summary ready by Friday." "I'll come in. And Tom, keep this confidential until I've reviewed everything." "Of course." We shook hands, and I left with my mind racing. By Friday, I'd know if David and Sarah's mortgage was part of that portfolio. Friday morning, I sat in Morrison's conference room with a thick binder. Tom had provided complete documentation, property addresses, loan amounts, payment histories. I scanned the alphabetical list. Adams, Bradley, Cooper, Davidson, and there it was. Residential mortgage number 47,291. Borrowers, David R. Sterling and Sarah M. Sterling. Property, 847 Maple Street, Westbrook Heights. Original loan, $660,000. Current balance, $643,700. My son's mortgage. Right there in black and white. "Find anything interesting?" Tom asked. "Just getting oriented. This is comprehensive." "The servicing transfer, how quickly can that be completed?" "Usually 30 to 45 days. The new owner has full discretion over payment terms within federal regulations." I closed the binder. "I want to make an offer." "For the entire portfolio?" "Yes. $43.2 million. Cash, 30-day closing." Tom's eyes widened. "That's above our target price, Richard. I believe in paying fairly for quality assets. I'll present this to our board, but I can't imagine any objections. When could you provide proof of funds?" "By Monday." "Excellent. Assuming board approval, I think we have a deal." As we shook hands, I felt satisfaction and dread. In 30 days, I would own my son's mortgage. What I did with that power would depend on what David and Sarah chose to do next. The next 3 weeks passed strangely. David called twice, both times with awkward distance confirming my fears about Sarah's influence. "How are you doing, Dad?" he'd ask, but there was no real warmth. "Fine, son. How's work?" "Can't complain. Listen, Sarah and I think it might be good if we spaced out our visits more. Gave each other room to breathe." There it was. Sarah's ultimatum, delivered in David's voice. "Whatever you think is best," I said neutrally. "We're trying to establish new routines as a couple." I understand. But I didn't understand how we'd gotten to this point. The mortgage purchase closed on a Tuesday. Tom called personally to confirm. Congratulations, Richard. You now own 237 residential mortgages. Borrowers receive notification letters tomorrow. Excellent. And the servicing transfers? Complete by next Friday. Your attorney has all documentation. I hung up and walked to my home office, where I'd prepared a special folder for mortgage number 47,291. For over 2 years, they'd made payments on time. $3,247 monthly. A substantial sum, but manageable. What they didn't know was that their mortgage had been transferred to Sterling Financial Holdings, the company I'd established for this purchase. What they really didn't know was that Sterling Financial Holdings was wholly owned by their irrelevant father-in-law. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. David called 30 minutes later. Dad, did you know Morrison Savings sold their mortgage portfolio? I heard they were considering it. Why? We got a letter saying our mortgage transferred to Sterling Financial Holdings. The name seemed familiar. I let the silence stretch. David, there are probably dozens of companies with Sterling in the name. Right. Just weird timing. How so? Nothing. Just coincidence, I guess. That evening, Sarah called. Richard, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. Not at all, Sarah. David mentioned you might know about Sterling Financial Holdings. I don't know anything specific. Is there a problem? No problem. The letter was just very formal, very corporate. Most financial companies operate differently from community banks. I suppose you're right. Richard, I want you to know we really appreciate everything you've done for us. We don't take it for granted. Interesting. Sarah had never spoken with such careful diplomacy. That's kind of you. When David mentioned spacing out visits, it wasn't personal. We're establishing independence as a couple. Of course. We'd still love to see you regularly. Maybe dinner once a month? Once a month. From weekly visits to scheduled appearances. Whatever works best for you and David. After she hung up, I sat staring at the phone. Sarah was worried about the mortgage transfer and trying to ensure my continued goodwill. What she didn't realize was that it was far too late for diplomacy. David figured it out on a Friday. Saturday morning at 7 a.m., he was on my porch holding a manila folder and wearing the expression of someone who'd discovered they'd been living in an illusion. We need to talk, he said. I poured coffee and waited as he opened his folder. Sterling Financial Holdings, incorporated 6 weeks ago. Principal owner, R.J. Sterling. Corporate address, 425 Pine Street. Hardwell & Associates, your law firm. I sipped my coffee. Dad, did you buy our mortgage? Yes. The word hung between us like a loaded weapon. Why? Because your wife doesn't think I belong in your new life. David's face went pale. What are you talking about? 3 weeks ago, I overheard Sarah explaining to you why I was a problem that needed to be solved. Dad, if you heard something out of context... 4 minutes and 37 seconds, David. I listened to my daughter-in-law explain why my presence was holding you back from your potential. David closed his eyes. Oh God, she's not wrong. I probably have been too involved, but the solution wasn't to push me out. It was to have an honest conversation about boundaries. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Because it sounded like my son was being convinced that his father was dead weight. David stared at the table. Sarah feels like we don't have independence as a couple. And you agree? Sometimes, maybe. I stood and retrieved a thick folder. Your mortgage, David, all the paperwork, everything you need to understand your new situation. What new situation? The situation where your mortgage is owned by someone who overheard his daughter-in-law planning his exile. David's hands shook. Dad, what are you going to do? That depends entirely on what you and Sarah choose to do. Are you going to foreclose? I could, but that's not my goal. Then what is? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. Your wife wanted to push me out because she thought I was holding you back. Now I hold your financial future. How's that for irony? Dad, please. I know Sarah said some things. Sarah said exactly what she meant, and you listened without defending our relationship. I was trying to keep the peace. No, you were taking the path of least resistance. David buried his face in his hands. What do you want from us? I want acknowledgement. I want an apology. And I want proof that this marriage isn't going to destroy the relationship I've spent 30 years building with my son. And if Sarah won't apologize, then you'll learn what it's like to deal with a mortgage holder who has personal feelings about your payment history. David looked up with fear in his eyes. You'd really use this against us? Your wife used my love against me. She turned my generosity into a liability. Why should I be held to a higher standard? We sat in silence, 30 years of fatherhood hanging between us. What specifically do you want us to do? I want a family meeting. You, me, and Sarah. Tonight. Here. Dad, I don't think Sarah will. David, your mortgage payment is due Tuesday. $3.247. I can process it normally or mark it late and assess penalties. Your choice. You're threatening us. I'm establishing new ground rules. Sarah wanted boundaries. She's about to get them. David stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. This isn't you, Dad. The man you knew was told he didn't belong in his son's new life. Maybe it's time you met the businessman who built Sterling Construction from nothing. What if Sarah refuses to come? Then Tuesday morning you'll receive a formal late payment notice. Did you know I have the right to quarterly property inspections? It's in the fine print. You wouldn't. Your wife wants to play hardball. I've been playing that game since before she was born. And if we both come tonight? Then we have a conversation about respect, boundaries, and what family really means. What time? 7 o'clock. And David, bring your checkbook. We're discussing your November payment. At 6:45, I watched David's BMW pull into my driveway. Sarah sat rigid in the passenger seat. They argued in the car for several minutes before walking to my door. Sarah, David, please come in. Sarah's smile was glacial. Richard, thank you for inviting us. We arranged ourselves in my living room like adversaries. Let's talk about family dynamics, I said. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Sarah began. People say things in private they don't necessarily mean. 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Which part didn't you mean? Sarah's composure slipped. I was venting frustrations. What specifically were you frustrated about? Richard, this is uncomfortable. Can't we agree to better communication? Answer the question. What were you frustrated about? She glanced at David. Fine. I felt like we couldn't make decisions without considering your reaction. It felt stifling. Give me an example. The kitchen renovation. Every time we discuss it, David wonders what you'll think. I looked at David. Is that true? I value your opinion. You know construction. But you're capable of making your own decisions. Yes. Then why haven't you? Because I didn't want to disappoint you. And Sarah interpreted that as me controlling your life. Yes. I can understand that perspective. What I can't understand is the solution. Instead of suggesting David have an honest conversation with me, you suggested I be pushed out entirely. I wasn't manipulating anyone. You gave my son an ultimatum. Choose growth over comfort, your marriage over your father. How is that not manipulation? Sarah's mask slipped. Because your constant presence is inappropriate, Richard. You have a key to our house. You bring groceries without being asked. You insert yourself into our marriage. Since when do I need permission to talk to my son? Since he got married. I'm his wife. I'm his primary family now. Dead silence. David looked mortified. Sarah looked like she'd finally said what she'd been thinking. I see. And what role should I play in David's life? A respectful, appropriate role. Holidays, special occasions, dinner once a month, like normal families. I stood and pulled out a spreadsheet. Let me show you what normal families don't do, Sarah. I set the numbers on the coffee table. David's wedding, $47,000. House down payment, $180,000. Kitchen appliances, $12,000. New roof, $18,000. Car repairs, $6,000. Total, $263,000 over 3 years. Sarah stared at the numbers, face pale. How many times did you thank me? How many times did you acknowledge what I was sacrificing? We appreciated everything. Did you? Because the conversation I overheard suggested my generosity had become a burden you resented. That's not fair. What's not fair is taking someone's love and money for 3 years, then deciding they don't belong in your life. I opened another folder. This is your mortgage payment schedule for the next 12 months. Your payment increases to $4.100 starting December. What? Sarah grabbed the paper. You can't just change our payment. Actually, I can. There's a clause allowing payment adjustments if property tax changes. Westbrook Heights just completed reassessment. Your value increased 18%. This is blackmail. This is business. You wanted me out of your personal lives. Fine, but our financial relationship now operates under different rules. Dad, this is crazy. We're family. Are we? 3 weeks ago, your wife convinced you I was a problem to be solved. Tonight, she said she needed permission for me to call my own son. I stood, feeling 30 years of fatherhood on my shoulders. Here's what's happening. Option 1. Sarah apologizes for her disrespectful behavior. You both acknowledge my generosity came from love, not control. We establish reasonable boundaries that respect both my role as David's father and your independence. Your mortgage terms remain as they were. And option 2, Sarah asked? Option 2, you maintain your attitude. Payments increase as scheduled. I exercise quarterly property inspection rights. You learn what a business relationship looks like instead of a family relationship. You're destroying our family, Sarah whispered. I'm responding to your desire to push me out. You can't reject my emotional involvement while expecting financial support. David looked between us. There has to be another way. There is. It's called treating your father with respect. Sarah stood abruptly. This is insane. You've lost your mind, Richard. The same kind of man who spends $263,000 on his son's happiness and gets told he doesn't belong in the family. We never said you didn't belong. You said I didn't belong in your new life. What's the difference? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it, caught in her own words. I think you both need time to consider your options. David, your December payment is due on the 1st. Let me know whether you're choosing option 1 or option 2. And if we choose option 1, David asked. It looks like respect. It looks like acknowledgement. It looks like Sarah understanding that my love for you isn't a threat to your marriage. It's the foundation that made you the man she fell in love with. I walked them to the door. Dad, David said at the threshold, I do love you. I know you do, son. The question is whether you're willing to fight for that love when someone tries to convince you it's a liability. 3 days later, David called. Dad, could we talk? Not on the phone. Could I come over? 20 minutes later, he sat across from me looking exhausted. Sarah's furious. She wants to get a lawyer. She's welcome to try. Everything I've done is legal. Dad, why didn't you just talk to us before buying the mortgage? Because I needed to understand how you'd respond to Sarah's manipulation before deciding what kind of relationship we were going to have. And what did you learn? That my son is willing to choose the path of least resistance rather than defend his father. That's not fair. When Sarah suggested pushing me out, what did you say? I said you were my father. And then you listened to her arguments and found them persuasive enough to start spacing out visits. I was trying to make everyone happy. That's impossible, David. Sarah forced a choice, and you chose her comfort over my feelings. I chose my marriage. No, you chose to avoid conflict by sacrificing your relationship with me. David stared into his coffee. So what happens now? That depends on what you and Sarah decide. She wants to fight this. And what do you think? I think you're hurt and angry. And maybe a little bit right. A little bit. Sarah does have strong opinions about boundaries. David, your wife doesn't want boundaries. She wants me eliminated except for controlled occasions when my presence serves her purposes. So what do you want? I want acknowledgement that I've been a good father who deserves respect. I want Sarah to understand that pushing me out isn't healthy. And I want proof your marriage can coexist with family relationships instead of replacing them. And if Sarah won't give you those things, then you'll need to decide what's more important, keeping your wife comfortable or maintaining a relationship with your father. You're asking me to choose. No, David, Sarah asked you to choose. I'm asking you to refuse to make that choice. David left an hour later, closer to understanding the real stakes. Friday evening, Sarah called. Richard, I'd like to come talk to you, alone. 30 minutes later, she stood on my porch in jeans and a sweater, looking tired and younger without her professional armor. I need to say some things, she said as we sat down. I'm listening. I owe you an apology, several apologies actually. I was wrong about you. About your role in David's life. I let my insecurities about independence turn into resentment toward you. Go on. I've never had a father-in-law before. My dad left when I was 8. I didn't understand what a healthy relationship between a grown son and his father looked like. What did you think it looked like? I thought David should be completely independent. I thought needing his father's approval meant he wasn't really an adult. And now? Now I think I was confusing independence with isolation. David loves you, respects you, values your opinion because you've earned it over 30 years. But you still felt stifled. Yes, but that was my problem, not yours. I should have talked to you directly instead of trying to convince David to push you away. I studied her face, looking for manipulation. Instead, I saw genuine regret. What changed your mind? David. He spent 3 days explaining what you've meant to him, the sacrifices, the support, how you taught him to be a good man. I realized I was asking him to choose between his wife and his hero. And I realized that if I succeeded in driving you away, I'd be married to a man who resented me for making him abandon his father. That shows wisdom. It shows stupidity that it took this long to figure out. Sarah, why didn't you just talk to me about feeling stifled? Because I was intimidated by you. You're successful, generous, confident. David clearly adores you. I felt like I couldn't compete. You weren't supposed to compete. You were supposed to add to it. I know that now. Richard, I'm asking for your forgiveness and a chance to start over. What would starting over look like? I'd like to learn how to be part of your family instead of threatened by it. I'd like David to feel comfortable loving both of us. I stood and retrieved the mortgage folder. These are your original loan terms. Effective immediately, payments return to $3, $247 monthly, no inspections, no complications. Sarah's hands shook as she took the papers. Just like that? Family relationships shouldn't be complicated by business leverage. I used the mortgage to get your attention, but I don't want it hanging over your heads. I don't deserve this generosity. Yes, you do. You're David's wife, which makes you family, and family forgives each other. Sarah started crying. I have one more request. Would you teach me to make that apple pie David talks about? I smiled for the first time in weeks. I'd be honored. 6 months later, I sat in David and Sarah's kitchen, watching my daughter-in-law roll pie dough with focused determination. Too thick? She asked. Perfect. Thin enough to be tender, thick enough to hold the filling. Sarah had been taking cooking lessons from me weekly since our reconciliation, approaching each session like graduate-level family dynamics. How's the new project coming? I asked David. Really well. The Morrison building renovation should finish ahead of schedule. Good. Quality work pays off. Sarah looked up from her dough. Richard, David told me you're considering another commercial project. The old Westfield warehouse conversion, mixed-use residential and retail, complicated but interesting. Sounds like it would benefit from a project manager with commercial experience, she said, glancing at David. David looked up from his newspaper. Are you suggesting I should work with Dad? If you're both interested. I looked at my son, remembering the eager teenager who'd worked construction sites with me. It would be a partnership, I said carefully. You'd bring real expertise. Different expertise. Your construction knowledge, my project management. Could be a good combination. The kitchen timer chimed, and Sarah pulled her practice apple pie from the oven. Golden brown crust, perfect, bubbling filling. That looks professional, I said. I've had an excellent teacher. David approached the counter. Smells exactly like childhood. That was the goal. I watched them work together, discussing weekend plans with easy intimacy, a couple who'd learned to navigate challenges together instead of against each other. Richard, Sarah said while cleaning up, David and I have been talking about Thanksgiving we'd like to host this year. Make it a real family celebration. That sounds wonderful. We were hoping you'd help with menu planning, and maybe share stories about Thanksgiving's past. I looked around their kitchen, the kitchen I'd helped them afford, where I was now welcome without reservation. I'd love to. Good. Because I was hoping you'd consider bringing someone. Mrs. Patterson from your neighborhood? David mentioned you two have been spending time together. We play bridge once a week, and she's been making you smile more lately. I felt my face warm. How did you— Dad, David interrupted with a grin. You whistle when you're happy. You've been whistling a lot since those bridge games started. Bridge requires concentration and strategy. Uh-huh. So you'll invite her? I imagined Dorothy Patterson at their dinner table, charming them with her wit and humor. I'll ask her. Perfect. And Richard? Thank you. For what? For giving us a chance to get this right. For being patient while I figured out how to be part of this family. For buying our mortgage to force a confrontation that saved our relationship, David added. I laughed. I wouldn't recommend that strategy to other families. Probably not. But it worked for us. Later, driving home through neighborhoods where porch lights glowed in the gathering dusk, I thought about the conversation I'd overheard 6 months ago. Your father doesn't belong in our new life. Sarah had been wrong about that, but in a way, also right. The old version of our relationship, where I gave endlessly without expecting acknowledgement, where boundaries were undefined and respect was assumed, that version hadn't belonged. What we'd built instead was better, more honest, based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I pulled into my driveway and sat looking at my house, where I'd raised David, mourned his mother, planned my response to Sarah's ultimatum. Tomorrow I'd call Dorothy about Thanksgiving. Next week, David and I would meet with the Westfield developers. Next month, Sarah and I would continue our cooking lessons. The conversation that lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds had changed everything, but maybe that's what families do. They break apart and rebuild themselves stronger. I walked toward my front door, whistling softly in the October air. Justice has many faces. Sometimes it looks like revenge, sometimes it looks like consequences. But sometimes, justice looks like a family learning to love each other better. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's turning them into allies. And sometimes the most powerful lesson is that respect isn't given because of blood or marriage. It's earned through character, maintained through consistency, and lost through taking people for granted. My son's wife thought I didn't belong in their new life. She was right. I belonged in something better. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to Justice Chronicles, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Where truth prevails, justice always finds its way.